up to them now.
I know there's one. And I was telling Bernie Sacker, you guys.
All right. Heavenly Father, we welcome you into this house through worship. To worship you by studying your words, so we may have a more greater understanding of history of your people and of what you have purpose for. We ask these things in Jesus' name. I thought I'd talk a little bit about Moses today. So, first question I have to ask is, who was Moses? What do we know about Moses other than he led the Israelites out of Egypt into the land of Canaan? They've been there already, off and on. I got a time chart thing that I printed out, and it's assuming that God created the earth in 6,000 years. Okay? Now, I know that's all false because scientists tell us the earth is billions of years old. But we don't know how old the earth is because, for one, the Bible wasn't specific as to how long a day was when God first created the earth. And he doesn't say a day. He said on the first day, which we don't know how long that was.
The Hebrew word long, 24-hour day, from daylight to night, it may be longer.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't know how many centuries or anything that took place in the first day or the second day. And actually, the sun rising and setting wasn't established later on until man was on the earth, and it was for him. So he could judge the seasons for planting crops and such. But Ecclesiastes tells us that there's a time for all things. There's a time to weep, time to celebrate. It's a time to grow crops, time to harvest. For everything, there's a season. Unlike the mamas and papas, so I'm a cast. But by this genealogical chart, it starts out, it says that from the exile to Egypt was from 1870 to 1450 BC. Now the thing is when the Israelites were in captivity in Egypt, they weren't conquered, in a sense. I mean, if you read about it, it talks about that long after Joseph. You remember Joseph, right? Joseph, so many colors, right? I'm like the Dolly Parton song. Okay. Joseph, if we go back a little bit, Joseph was the youngest, I believe, was of the sons of Jesse. Yeah, and
No, not Jesse, Jacob, but he was the 11th son. Benjamin.
Yeah, Benjamin. But anyway, he was cast. His brothers were jealous of him, and they told their father that he was dead. He was killed, but they threw him in a well and then sold him to slavery. And Joseph's climb from slavery to, elitism, as it would be said, was significant. He went from in slavery to then he was Potiphar's. He was working for one of the, I don't remember what Potiphar's job was, but his old lady had a liking to him, and he got cast back into jail there because she lied about him. He didn't like her. He goes, my master had given me control of everything in the household except you. I'm not going to defile his trust. Who knows? Maybe she was a homely looking girl.
Nobody knows.
She might have been a homely looking girl and just said, you know what? Nobody else seems to make a pass at me, so I'll throw myself at the slave boy and see if I can make him.
I wonder how many today pass up. I think of a young man that was on my caseload in New York, and we left our program. got an apartment in Attica somewhere. And the married couple, the husband worked during the day, and the wife found him attractive, and he told me he had to come back in the program to do that. He said, either give her what she wanted, or I'll boot it out. She lied about it. So he gave him. He didn't belong to it. I mean,
So
he had integrity.
he didn't take the same path that Joseph took.
No, he didn't. Certainly didn't.
But Joseph rose up to be like the king's right-hand man. You know, he was told about the famine that was going to come into the land. And God told him about that. And he would store up grain in the silos. I mean, they had huge amounts of surplus. All right? And whenever the famine hit, people sold their land back to get food to eat. You know, so he saved the land because they had stockpiled all this food, the grain, you know, and then we're able to, you know, he gained favor with the king of Egypt, and you know, but when we get into Exodus, we talk about Moses. It starts and talks about that. It says it gives you the names of Israel who were to Egypt and with Jacob, and with each of this family: Reuben, Simon, Levi, and Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, and Benjamin, Dan and Naphtali, Gad and Asher, and the descendants of Jacob they numbered 70 in all. And Joseph was already in Egypt. So now Joseph and all of his brothers and all generations died. But the Israelites were fruitful and multiplied greatly and became exceedingly numerous, so that the land was filled with them. So there was a lot of them. Okay? Well, we see this same story coming up here as in history. Okay? We saw it with Hitler, so Mussolini, right? They became in charge. They noticed that there was one population of people that was a lot of them. Hitler saw it as a scapegoat. The Jews were wealthy. They had all kinds of money. He needed money. Okay, and he couldn't exactly tax the German people, even though they were German. He separated them from the state when he brought them into the light. Okay, and he made them a scapegoat. He wanted their money, he wanted their wealth, so he blamed them for the way that everything was going. And the rest of the people believed it. Okay. Now today, people try to do that same thing, but it isn't always true, and it wasn't true then. Okay, they weren't the reason for their economy being the way it was. There's a lot of other things that made their economy the way it was.
After World War I, was treated for South.
Yeah,
The Germans brought the war on.
yeah.
There's no way they did.
With the assassination of King Ferdinand, and they raped the museums, they took all their art and stuff like that. So their country was, in other words, they just went in and took what they wanted. And the country was left in turmoil. And being a great speaker that he was, Hitler rose to power immediately, pretty much. You know, and then he had his thugs, you know, that did his will. And he was pretty much a puppet in many senses, as modern politicians and rulers today are. You know, somebody behind them's telling them what to say and what to do. You know, but this is similar in a sense, but it said here that a new king who did not know about Joseph came to power in Egypt. Yeah, I read this and I'm thinking, I don't know how he would not know about Joseph. You'd think that they were educated.
He knew. That's not what it means. He disregarded.
Yeah.
As you said about Hitler, he did escape it.
Yeah, and that is how it comes about, because he says, he said to his people, the Israelites have become much too numerous for us. He says, come, we must deal shrewdly with them, or they will become more numerous, and if war breaks out, they will join our enemies and fight against us and leave the country.
But the Jews were Semitic. The Egyptians were Hamitic. They were descended from a different son of Noah. Like, it wasn't uncommon in the ancient world to have this population, this foreign population. In Egypt, the Semites came in, I think, under the Hyksos They had a whole dynasty. Egypt had recuperated from that. You know, so if you look north there and you see all those Jews up there, Semites, you got the Semitic population over here that could be threatening. I mean, what did we do in World War II? We took
Well, anybody
Japanese
wasn't-
descent and
yeah.
put them in concentration camps in America.
Yeah, we did that with the Japanese Corps. Anybody that looked Japanese or had a sign with a Japanese name, we put them in
Sorry?
what they call them, confinement camps. They didn't call them concentration camps then. They called them containment or something like that. But it was the same thing. It was that we locked them up because we didn't know who to trust. But when I read this, the first thing that popped in my head was the movie Bug's Life. Grasshopper says, if you let one ant stand up against us, then they might all stand up. And these puny ants outnumber us 100 to 1. And if they ever figure out, there goes our way of life. It's not about the food, it's about keeping those ants in line. So the king of Egypt had that in mind. He knew there were many more of those, but if you threaten, it doesn't matter if you threaten at a certain points. You know, you can keep something larger than you or not. You know, it's all a matter of presenting yourself. You know, they don't have they have sticks and stones. We have spears and swords. You know, when you talk about the airplane that flew over before it was heading to the Pentagon, the one that crashed in the field. You know, they decided to bomb rush the guys that were there. They said they had a bomb where it was. But I was telling my brother, it's a box cutter. It's a box cutter. You get a paper cut. He goes, well, who wants to get cut? So there's always somebody's going to bum rush that guy and get a paper cut. Box cutter doesn't mean anything. Now, if you had a knife, if you're the first person willing to take that knife, everybody else isn't going to have to. But who's been willing to take the first one? And if you got a crowd of people not willing to take that first sword, you can subdue them all. You know, the gangs in the early American history in New York and Chicago would use such a thing. There were many more people than there were those gangs. But if you take one person and show them that, you know, this is what's going to happen to everybody else that doesn't listen to us, and you execute them on the street, then everybody else gets afraid. Okay. So imagine this is the same thing that happened in Egypt. And the king of Egypt decided he was going to subdue them. One of the things he did was so they put slave masters over them to oppress them with forced labor. And they built Pithom and Ramses as store cities for the Pharaoh. The more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied and spread. So the Egyptians come to dread the Israelites, and they worked them ruthlessly. They made their lives bitter with hard labor and brick and mortar, with all kinds of work in the fields, and in all their hard labor, the Egyptians used them ruthlessly. So they just decided to try and beat them down. Okay, give them more to do. You know? And this was a way to further knock the people down, in a way, make them less likely to fight against you. Doing what I say, you do what I say. That's the way it was. Okay, and that was their idea, to do what I say. The king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, whose names were Zipporah and Puah, when you help the Hebrew women in childbirth and observe them on the delivery stool, if it is a boy, kill him. If it is a girl, let her live. We think of it as cruel, but at that time frame, I mean, if you look at Greece, any child that was malformed, they would discard it. The whole thing was you needed a healthy child, a healthy male child was a healthy soldier. And the Egyptians are looking at this saying, if I get more male Hebrew people, that's more they can fight against me.
Life is a life. Take that life.
That's not the way it's looked at.
No, it's not the way it's looked at.
Life isn't looked at as a positive thing. I mean, today we shouldn't look at it.
60 million person.
Yeah.
World
Yeah.
right
And look at it as an inconvenience.
You don't want to get pregnant and do.
They justify it by saying it's not a life until it's self-sustained itself. And I heard a woman spoke up on pro-life, and she says, well, what do you consider a life? And they said something that can take care of itself. And she goes, then my 2-year-old's not a life. She goes, 'cause he cannot take care of himself. He needs me for everything.
That's right.
And the whole thing is a justification. If you can convince yourself in your head that what you're doing is right,
Yeah.
then there's no wrong and wrong. So if you use the pro-life and if you use the thought pattern saying that it's not a life until this such a stage, then I have all this time beforehand and I can just get rid of it. It means nothing. When does life exist? Some people say that it begins at conception. Some people it doesn't, to until this stage. But and many people agree, many disagree. And like I said,
Church, for the most divisive issues in the church today, that homosexuality.
but if you can convince yourself what you're doing is right, doesn't matter what it is, you don't think of it as wrong. And that in itself is a poorness in history of humans, is that whenever they're taught a certain way, right or wrong, they don't see it as that. They see it as this is what I was taught, so this must be the right way to do it. But when he went to the midwives, they wanted to eliminate all of the male Hebrew soldiers, Israelite soldiers. So they said, the midwives, however, feared God and did not do what the king of Egypt had told them. They let the boys live. And the king of Egypt summoned the midwives and asked them, why have you done this? And why have you let the boys live? He couldn't exactly execute. He needed midwives. And they knew their purpose. They knew their value. Okay? And they come before the Pharaoh, and he's like, why did you do what I said? I mean, it would have been easy for him to say, you have not done what I said, and cut their heads off. Right? Make an example. But he needed them. Okay? They're going to have babies regardless. He needed in a sense, he needed a spy. He needed somebody that he could put in there to say, this is what I want done, so this is what I want you to do. So he asked them, why have you done this? Why have you let the boys live? And the midwives answered Pharaoh, Hebrew women are not like Egyptian women. They are vigorous, and they give birth before the midwives arrived. They did it before we got there. We couldn't stop them. Yeah.
You know what, though, now you said he needed them. That kind of proved he didn't. If the midwife admitted they're born before he got there, he could have, okay, we don't need you then.
They could have been lying too.
Well, they probably were, but
Yeah.
he wouldn't have known that, and he could have done away with the midwife by them.
If it being, as somebody would say, he's a man and he's ignorant on the birth of children.
Well, that makes a lot of sense right there.
Yeah. So he wouldn't have realized that he didn't need them.
Touche.
He said, so God was kind to the midwives, and the people increased and became even more numerous. And because the midwives feared God, he gave them families of their own. So that's a substantial thing there. Is if you're a midwife, I mean, I would imagine most cases you weren't anything but a slave. You were a helper. That's all that your only job. You weren't able to have a family of your own because your job was to help them give birth. And then it says here, then Pharaoh gave this order to all of his people: every boy that is born must be thrown into the Nile, but let every girl live. So he sent his soldiers out to take care of the act. Now, we noticed that the similarity of this and in the story of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, that there was a fear of the male children. And in the New Testament, it's a fear of the new king. Okay, Herod sent out his soldiers to kill every male child that was born. All right, and Jesus was hid away and sent, from Bethlehem, so that he wouldn't, be executed. Here, Moses is sent away, swept away, and so he doesn't get executed.
There's another similarity too. Some New Testament scholars speak of the New Testament Exodus. Christ's baby is taken to Egypt at God's command, okay, as were the Israelites under Jacob in Genesis. And the Israelites are brought out, delivered by God's command, Moses, and Christ returns to the Holy Land at God's command. So there's a number of similarities there. Unfortunately, some scholars will look at that and say, well, Matthew made all that up just to, anytime there's that biblical symmetry or whatever, the critics find some kind of reason to criticize it.
Yeah, other than just being similarities.
And one was a picture of the coming one.
One of the things I wrote in here was that God shows us throughout history of the Israelite people how they went from good times to persecution to a redeemer, to good times to the rebellious acts, to slavery to redemption, and to rebellion, to eventually the ultimate redemption in Christ Jesus. So for every time that they rebelled and he punished them, he sent them a redeemer. And whenever they were persecuted, when they weren't acting up, so to speak, rebelling against God, and somebody tried to capture them, in this case, he sent them a redeemer. In every aspect, they were sent a redeemer. So he gave them a way out. There's a lot of times when I was growing up, they said, "Well, it doesn't matter. Like, when you're sinning against God, He always gives you a way out. Yeah. So you're never left alone to your own devices. There's always a way out." Now it says here, now a man of the house of Levi, named Levi, married a Levite woman, and she became pregnant and gave birth to a son. And when she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him for 3 months. When she could hide him no longer, she got a papyrus basket for him and coated it with tar and pitch. And she placed the child in it and put it among the reeds along the bank of the Nile. So in a sense, what he said to do was already being done. The male child being placed in the Nile. His sister stood at the distance to see what would happen to him. Then Pharaoh's daughter went down to the Nile to bathe, and her attendants were walking along the river bank, and she saw the basket among the reeds and sent her slave girl to get it. And she opened it and saw that the baby, he was crying, and she felt sorry for him. "This is none of the Hebrew babies," she said, or "this is one of the Hebrew babies," she said. And then his sister asked Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and get one of the Hebrew women to nurse this baby for you?" "Yes, go." Okay. So it's his sister sitting there watching him, and she goes to Pharaoh's sister and goes, "You want me to get somebody to take care of this child for you?" So she goes and gets his mother.
One of the things I see in that is God's sense of humor. Pharaoh said, "Drown babies." The mother puts her baby in the Nile, and God's saying,
Yeah.
And then, Miriam gets Moses' mother to be the nurse.
Yeah.
And so all through this stay in Pharaoh's house, he's being taught religion and so forth from Judah.
Yeah, taught both sides of the fence. Because he grew strong in the house of Pharaoh. Because they taught him, probably taught him the architecture, all of that, mathematics, all that stuff.
Jewish tradition, the rabbis claim that Moses was the leader of Pharaoh's armies, and so he learned military tactics, which makes sense. God was training this man through Pharaoh to defeat Pharaoh.
Yeah.
See, God was no sense of humor.
She says, "Yes, go," she answered, and the girl went and got the baby's mother. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this baby and nurse him for me, and I will pay you." Ain't nothing like being paid to take care of your own kid. It says, when the child grew older, she took him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She named him Moses, saying, "I drew him out of the water." It said, one day after Moses had grown up, he went to where his own people were and watched them at their hard labor. He saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his own people. Now, he knew that he was Hebrew. There's no way his mother would have not told him that. There's a good chance he probably didn't really agree with this woman that was that was raising him, his nursemaid. He probably didn't know for sure that it was his mother because, he knew that the Pharaoh's sister was his mother when he was being raised. All right? So, and what I understand is in this story is that how she talked her brother into saying that was her kid.
I don't know what she did.
Because,
She was royalty.
yeah,
The Rose not gonna argue with her.
I mean, it would have been a time when he was saying that you didn't gain any weight. You weren't ever bigger than she said. I showed it. I hit it well with my clothes.
I don't think that she told her brother that. There's too many variables involved.
You mean the palace is so big she could hit?
No, I don't think she said she was pregnant at all. I found this baby. I want this baby.
Oh.
Maybe she couldn't have children. Maybe she's
Oh,
one baby. I don't know. But why is the Pharaoh going to argue? One Hebrew brat. Okay, raise him up. We'll use him. But she's Pharaoh's sister. How much trouble with? We're outnumbered here. I think of the ladies, so I won't say everything I'm thinking, but
That'd be great.
You only got to ride with one of them.
I think they're enough, so I got to write two of them.
No. I don't want to drive with anyone else if you don't want.
Yeah, you say it.
But anyways, like I say, Pharaoh's sister, it's very possible she probably just could have said, "This is my child. I don't care what you say." So, back to where we're supposed to get in here. Moses was tending the flock. Oh. One day Moses had grown up. He went out to where his own people were, and watched them at their hard labor. He saw an Egyptian being beaten by a Hebrew, or saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, and one of his own people. Glancing this way and that, and seeing no one, he killed the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. The next day he went out and saw two Hebrews fighting, and he asked one of them wrong, "Why are you hitting your fellow Hebrew?" And the man said, "Who made you ruler and judge over us? Are you thinking of killing me as you killed the Egyptian?" Then Moses was afraid and thought, what have I done? What I did must have become known. So there's always eyes. Somebody sees you somewhere. God sees everything. And it's very possible that the Hebrew who was getting beaten was the one who was in the fight the next time. Yeah. But when the Pharaoh heard of this, he tried to kill Moses. But Moses fled from Pharaoh and went up to live in Midian, where he sat down by a well. Now a priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came to draw water and fill the troughs of water to water their father's flock. And some shepherds came along and drove them away. But Moses got up and came to their rescue and watered their flock. So the 7 beautiful women come up to the thing, and he's a single guy, raised strongly in the Egyptian, So here comes the hero.
Chivalry.
Yeah. When the girls returned to rule their father, he asked them, "Why have you returned so early?" They answered, "An Egyptian rescued us from the shepherds. He even drew water for us and watered the flock." And he asked, "Well, where is he?" He asked his daughters, "And why did you leave him?" invite him to have something to eat. Now, that's probably his guy brother thinking, I gotta get my daughters married off. You know, gotta get these women out of the nest. Birds gotta fly. You know. And here this guy came, you know he's strong. He chased all them shepherds off. He saved my daughters. He's already got favor in my eyes, you know. And he's probably hoping this guy didn't show up with a, you know, pierced everything and a leather collar with spikes sticking out, tattoos all over his body, you know, riding a Harley, whatever, you know. Probably thinking, oh, I hope he ain't a car, you know. So Moses agreed to stay with the man who gave his daughter Zipporah to Moses in marriage. Zipporah gave him birth to a son, and Moses named him Gershom, saying, I have become an alien in a foreign land. Man, if you had to get a name for your kid, you know. So, what's your name? Gershom. Oh, I'm sorry. You know, because they probably knew the meaning of the name. So you're an alien in a foreign land, huh? Have a place to call home? You know, wandering nomad? You know. So, what we have so far on Moses is that, you know, he was hid at birth. He was hid, hid most of his birth until he was, you know, found favor in a promising, you know, upbringing. You know, it wasn't like he was born in poverty, which he wasn't. The only poverty that they had was because the Egyptians were trying to beat them down and take everything they had. You know, it wasn't like the Hebrew people were exactly not well-to-do. They were expanding in numbers, you know, so much that the king of Egypt feared them. You know, but I think if you look back on that, wouldn't you think it would have been easier to maybe, you know, welcome them into the kingdom and make them part of what you already are doing?
In America, we treated some immigrants badly, but we Americanized them.
Yeah.
And you know, you go to New York City, and still a lot of police have an Irish name. Okay, and the Jews of New York City are a big part of the wealth. But yeah, it would have been better.
Yeah.
Welcome them in, you know, make friends with them.
They probably just saw it as free labor. That's what the king probably said. Well, I can get free labor out of this. You know, they're expanding, they're prospering so well on their own. Just think how much I could prosper if they were doing it for me. You know, lots of comedy in different aspects focuses on that with the Jewish people. You know, it's the Jewish people were very good with money. They said the same thing about Asians. You know, they don't need a calculator, it's one in their head. You know, a lot of stuff like that's put out there saying that they're very good at math. You know, the Jewish people make a lot of money. You know, but the stereotype is that they do. The stereotype is that some people don't do anything. Some people do a lot. You know, and there's a little bit of everything in that in every culture. No matter what your skin tone or whatever your nationality is, there's a little bit of everything to that in everybody.
I remember growing up that blacks were lazy, Irish were drunkards, Jews were the worst of the lot. Okay?
Well, they used to say that the poor people weren't educated enough and they didn't do anything to try to get themselves out of being a poor person. When in reality, there's a lot of people that are born in massive wealth that do work hard, you know, and are smart. They just can't afford to have the education of a college degree. But then again, you have a lot of people that are born in with lots of money that are lazy, and whenever they inherit that money, it's gone because they have no education. They squander it. But in the same aspect, you have a lot of people that are born with wealthy, you know, children, wealth, and they go and get educated and they make more of it. Some examples of that is Paris Hilton. You know, she was born into wealth, and she has probably got more money now than when her dad had when her.
Well, another one's Trump. His parents weren't poor.
Yeah.
My insurance, in fact, when my wife and I were stationed at the hospital, one of his parents, his brother, they weren't billionaires, but they weren't poor.
Yeah.
Okay, and Trump was a good businessman. He took what they gave him, and now
He
he's
said his
doing-
father gave him his first million, and he made the rest.
Yeah, I've seen people twist that on him when they talk to him, say, oh, a million. You know, would have been more impressive if he'd have said, my father gave me my first $100 bill, and I made billions after that. You know, I don't know how you look at it to make it, to turn it to say what it is, but to him at that time, he probably thought $1 million was like $100 because of the amount of money they had. You know, but, you know, say Paris Hilton, she has her own clothing line and stuff like that, and the twins are on Full House. Whatever that
Oh,
is.
yeah.
Olsen's. Yeah, they, my understanding is that they weren't very wealthy and they would never run that show, but they are now because they have their own, you know, clothing line and, you know, and you can't exactly use Miley Cyrus because her dad was a big musician and her family's history is musicians, but I don't know how much money they had as far as they went, but she has a lot. I mean, she did Hannah Montana. They said one tour she did, she made like $1 million or $1 billion in one of her tours, you know? But they made money by working hard. Doing what they had to do.
I respect that.
But, you know, like I said, in the same aspect, in that same category, there's a lot of kids out there that are born into wealth that they just want to go, well, my dad's got a lot of money, I'm gonna be left a lot of money, you know, what do I have to do? Why do I have to do anything?
What is surprising though, that a lot of those actors, and that if you've seen one of the talk shows, some of them don't give the kids money to make them work for it.
But what I'm getting at here now is Moses was born into a lap of luxury. He was born as a Hebrew, and they were being beat down, but his mother gave him a chance to make a lot of himself. She was his nursemaid, and he became the son of Pharaoh's sister. So he may not have been in successional actual line to be the Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, but he was high enough in there that he made a lot of, you know, he could have very well have adapted himself into the life of an Egyptian. You know, when he saw the Hebrew slave being beat, he could have very well went down there and just told the guard, hey, stop doing that. He could have just said, you know, give an order. But instead, he thought he took the side of the Hebrew side, but he thought he was paying favor to the guys being beat. He thought, I'm doing you a favor. And he killed the Egyptian guard. But in reality, what happened was that Egyptian, or the Hebrew, that I'm guessing is most likely the one who was fighting later, was probably the one who was getting beat earlier. You know, and makes you wonder what was he doing that he was getting beat? You know.
I remember reading one writer that says he believes Moses, even at that point, knew he was to be the deliverer. I don't know if there's a biblical basis for that, but supposedly he knew that, and he decided to do it his way. It didn't work out. He's exiled for 40 years where God trained him.
Yeah.
God's in no hurry.
No, he has a timeline of his own, and it may not coincide with what you have to do. It makes me think of is it Evan Almighty? Morgan Freeman, and Evan is, well, I got plans. He just starts laughing. He goes, that's funny. So you got plans. You know? It makes you wonder if God actually, when you go, God, look, I can't do it. I got plans. And he just goes, yeah, okay, you got plans. My plans are what matters. Do things to my will, not to your own, what you want to do. You know, what you see is only 100 feet down the road. I see miles, years and years down the road. You know, God's the ultimate chess player. You know, if you ever see the chess championships, before they start, the guy makes one move and he goes like this and knocks his king over, and he goes, oh, he had him defeated in 6 moves. You know, you already seen the moves out. I've been playing the game. You know, I don't do that. You know, I'm the king of curly. You got to beat me. I'm not going to give up. But so Moses, he kills the Egyptian guard, and then later he says, you know, he comes down and goes, look, I stood up for you. You know, why are you fighting amongst yourselves? And what's it goes the Hebrew guy? What's it to you? Who made you to rule over us? You know, What are you gonna do? You gonna kill me like you did the guard? And he got scared, he ran. So we come up to the point where he has a wife now. The daughters that came to give the well to get water, to water their sheep, Moses knocked the shepherds away and helped to water their flock. And as a reward, this guy gave his daughter to him to have be a wife. And it doesn't say much about what she is. I mean, here what Zipporah is like. It doesn't really expand so much as where I've seen it in movies. You know, I go by movies because somebody tries to elaborate, right? And in the movies it said she was a strong-willed woman, right?
Isn't it, I think somewhere,
I missed it. If it was in there, I missed it.
there's somewhere, I think, Moses didn't circumcise his son. And so God's gonna wipe the son out or something. Because remember, Abraham said 8 days, he's circumcised that boy. Moses must have been circumcised, which is probably one of the reasons they recognized him as a Hebrew child. I don't think the Egyptians, some ancient people, other people practiced circumcision, but not for the same reason, the same age. But he didn't circumcise his son. And so Zipporah, I think, takes a flint knife and she does it. And God moves back. So yeah, she was strong-willed.
Well, except when I was reading this, I didn't get the illustrations. Like I said, when you're watching some of the movies, it shows that she's like what they consider like a strong Irishman, headstrong, bold, brazen,
Like the role of Maureen O'Hara.
Yeah. And if it's one of those things where the husband's he's the in charge and stuff like that, the household, but he goes here.
Were they all circumcised back in the day?
Yes.
Jews were.
All the Jews, just the Jews?
Well, no, circumcision was practiced by other ancient civilizations, but not that young. A Hebrew baby boy, 8 days of age, still is circumcised. Okay, where some of them practice it at puberty.
Yeah.
Okay, some for other reasons. So circumcision wasn't just the Jewish people, but all the Jewish men had to be circumcised until between the Old and New Testament, when the Jews were dominated by the Greeks. When the Greek men would run races and stuff, they did it naked. Well, here Jewish men are doing it; they're circumcised, and the Greeks are laughing at them. And so some of the Jewish men would actually have surgery done so that that would be hidden. Okay. But yeah, the law of Moses said you circumcise them.
Yeah, the reason why I brought that up, there's doctors and gynecologists and urologists that say if you have it done, you're going to be more clean than you are with it hiding, because you're not getting germs, preventing anything that happens.
That's controversial.
I understand, but
some medical,
they say,
some medical profession claim there's really no medical benefit. Others say there is.
yeah,
But the Jews, it was a sign of covenant.
yeah,
God made an agreement, and the two signs of the covenant was the circumcision on a man's body, and then Saturday, they ceased working.
yeah,
No other ancient society I've ever read about did that.
yeah.
They worked 7 days a week. And so you have those two strong signs that I'm a Jew. I'm in a covenant relationship with Yahweh.
But after she gave him a son, it doesn't go in much right now. It just talks about that during that long period, the king of Egypt died, and the Israelites groaned in their slavery and cried out, and their cry for help and their cry for help because of the slavery went up to God. And God heard their groaning, and he remembered his covenant with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. So God looked on the Israelites and was concerned about them. So here God's hears their moans and cries, and he's working on sending them a redeemer, one to take them out of their slavery.
I do.
In fact, elsewhere in the Old Testament, God says, I redeemed you.
I do.
Well, he does everything, even though if he does a puppet, They're, some people call it a puppet. If he uses you to do the action, you know, you can't say in all truthfulness that you did it because
You were his instrument.
you didn't do it. You know, to say you did something without God is kind of, false.
He posted what was going on there.
Oh, no. In fact, last Sunday I covered it. He was scared. He didn't care that God told him everybody that was after you was dead. You know, in his mind, he knew that he had killed somebody, and he was sure that they were going to kill him as soon as he walked back into Egypt. You know, so
You have a purpose to do that?
if
Kill somebody?
he killed an Egyptian guard whenever he was brutally beating one of the Hebrew.
Oh, so it was self-defense?
No,
Oh,
He
no?
went down and killed him because he was killing one of his people.
Oh,
And then later on, there was two Hebrews that were fighting, and he went down and confronted them and said, "Why are you fighting amongst yourselves? You're two Hebrew men. Why are you fighting?" And the guy says, "Well, who are you to, rule over us? Who makes you in charge? Are you gonna kill me like you did that guard?" And he thought that nobody saw him do it. So, but he was wrong.
people talk too, whether he was a family member,
Lots of people talk,
that's right.
and it ain't always the truth in what they're talking about.
It's twisted.
But I'm out of time. So, somebody like to close us in prayer.
I thought I was gonna catch part of your
Yeah.
class. I come early today.
Father, we thank you this time we have been again some information. Continue to with us and bless us, Father. Do all that we need to do. Please help us.
We covered Moses last Sunday and this Sunday.
And how about this? Remember the week we talked about God covered the earth with water? He took it all away and then brought the plants